transfer portal. Also, we're going to rave about the defense, but I've got one little concern with that unit moving forward, and it's look-ahead line time for Florida State and Syracuse this week. And all that coming up and more. It's the Locked On Syracuse Podcast.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into the Locked On Syracuse podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen every single morning. We are free and available on all platforms, wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. All you got to do, find us Locked On Syracuse on YouTube. Tim Leonard and Tyler Aki with you here. Check out the show on Twitter at LO_Syracuse as well. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, wherever you get your YouTube and done, all that good stuff. We've got a jam-packed show today, and it's brought to you by RockAuto.com. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at RockAuto.com. And make sure you let them know that Locked On sent you. Let's just start with the big news of yesterday that kind of came across the wire. Jarveon Howard entering his name in the transfer portal, and he's kind of lost favor within this running back rotation. It really feels like two guys have almost lost favor in the running back rotation between himself and Cooper Lutz. But Jarveon Howard choosing to move on. Are you surprised this was an in-season thing? Because to me, I'm not surprised he's necessarily making the decision to transfer. I'm a little surprised that it's happening within the season this early.
Yeah, I mean, he should transfer, whether it was in the season or at the end of the season, right? Because Sean Tucker is going to be the back for a while, barring injury. Cooper Lutz is younger than him. Abdul Adams has seemingly leapfrogged him on the depth chart. And while Cooper Lutz might have fallen out of favor, he's still at least contributing on special teams a lot, and he's a younger player. Josh Huff, we really like, is there. There's just a lot of bodies, and we joked about how, man, I wish Syracuse could make a trade and trade a running back for a left tackle or just a position that we need
receiver.
more. Maybe
How about a receiver?
Yeah, I was going to say a wide receiver. That was going to be my next one. That'd be great right now. But we can't, and I think Jarveon Howard, the way he reacted after Garrett Schrader took it in himself against Albany, kind of threw up his hands, and you know, he's just angry that he's not out there, and he missed last year, and that probably set him back, and there's not a path to playing time right now unless a lot of injuries happen. So maybe it's a little surprising that he opted out during the season, but I don't blame him for kind of moving on.
And you think about it, you brought up the opt-out last year. It's amazing what parallel universe we might live in right now if Jarveon Howard plays last season.
Yeah.
Maybe he's the Sean Tucker. Maybe he's the guy who they're saying bring down the 44 for. Maybe he's the guy who's got Heisman odds right now on BetOnline.ag, and we're going to talk about that when we get to our look-ahead lines as well. But isn't that crazy? Like, he seemed like he was almost on top of the running back world and like the next guy in waiting after that 2018 season when they go 10-3, and all of a sudden now he's off to a new school despite having success at Syracuse.
Yeah, it just goes to show you that football is crazy, and I don't know why we ever try and predict these things, right? Because 2018, you would have thought that we'd be talking about a top 25 Syracuse team for a couple years in a row, and Jarveon Howard would be the bell cow, and that's not been the case. And even Abdul Adams also has not panned out the way a lot of fans thought. He comes over from Oklahoma. Right. That was a big deal. Like, he was in the Tristan Jackson group, and Tristan Jackson had that huge season, goes on. He's in the NFL now and trying to make a roster, but Abdul Adams really hasn't done a whole lot, and you got to think his opt-out hurt him as well. I do think that set them back this past year, and now Cooper Lutz is sort of in the conversation as well. He looked good last year. We've got a really talented running back room. It's kind of shocking how we got all these guys to commit, and I guess it's partially because Sean Tucker was not a highly sought-after guy. I mean, he was, and he was one of our early commits in that cycle, but you know, he was a 3-star guy that is looking like a 4 or even a 5-star at times when you watch him play.
Right, exactly. And again, you can't blame them for sitting out. They're making a personal decision for them. So yeah, they're doing what they felt was best for them in the moment when everything happened, and it happened quickly for a lot of these football players too. So it gets to the question now, should Dino have used him more? Because even when Jarveon Howard has come in the past couple of seasons, he's been good. He doesn't have the gaudy numbers to go along with it, but you would say that when you saw him run the football, he played well. He did what he was asked to do. He was a good pass blocker too, which is something that always gets you on the field as a running back, especially as a young running back, like it did with Jarveon Howard. But I ask you, Tim, should Dino have used a little bit more of Jarveon Howard this season?
It's such a tough one because I think he sees him in practice and he decided Abdul Adams and Cooper Lutz are better than him. And if he believes that, and if the running back coaches believe that, and everyone that's around the offense believes that, who am I to say that they're wrong, right? Like, they get to see them more than us. I do think he's probably one of the better pass blockers we have. And Sean Tucker, if you want to poke one little hole at him, that's a weakness probably in his game right now. He's not super fast straight line as well, but you're also a young running back. You're never really going to be great in pass blocking. That's a totally normal weakness to have. And Sean Tucker's great. And we talked about yesterday, is he using Sean Tucker too much? Maybe, but that doesn't necessarily mean he should have used Jarveon Howard more. I mean, I think he just needs to get more carries to RB2 and RB3. And it seems like he's decided Jarveon Howard was neither of those guys. So, I mean, I don't expect them to ever use 4 running backs. I think that's just kind of unnecessary to go that deep.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think you laid it out perfectly there where, and even if there was one hole in Sean Tucker's game and you bring up the pass blocking, guess who's a fantastic pass blocker as well? Abdul Adams. I mean, he's actually slightly better than Jarveon, and Jarveon is a really good pass blocker, but Abdul Adams is borderline elite in that category when you look at some of his Pro Football Focus stuff. I would like to see a few more touches go to Abdul Adams, just spell Sean Tucker here or there, but I think also having a dual threat quarterback, as we're expecting to see Garrett Schrader once again for this upcoming game against Florida State, I think that also takes the load off of a guy like Sean Tucker. But it's tough to see where you've got Sean Tucker running the ball over 30 times and Garrett Schrader getting, what was it, like 15 touches rushing the football against Liberty. It's baffling to me that, okay, there's 45 touches and still he's getting 2/3 and he's getting over 30 carries per game. I still feel like you need to find other bodies to give some touches to, whether it's Adams, whether it's Cooper Lutz, and it can be extensions of the run game too. Maybe some screen passes to Cooper or Adams, but that's a lot of work for a guy like Sean Tucker, and I don't think it's sustainable.
I'll put it this way. I think going into the season, there was no way that Dino could avoid one guy being unhappy in that running back room and one guy likely probably leaving. And unfortunately for Jarveon Howard, it's him. And I think he's a good player, and I wish him all the best, obviously, but we just don't really need him, which is, I guess, a luxury to have right now. And maybe that would have changed if Sean Tucker does get hurt, and maybe we'll look back on this and say, gosh, maybe Jarveon Howard, they should have kept him a little bit more happy. That's a possibility. But as it stands right now, I thought one guy was going to leave this year. Even in the middle of the season, I thought that was going to be Abdul Adams, just as a blind, bold prediction. And it seems like the odd man out is Howard, and he's decided to move on, which, again, all the best to him. And hopefully it doesn't come back to bite us, and hopefully those running backs stay healthy.
The whole take on this is it makes a lot of sense for everyone involved here. For Jarv, for Syracuse football, everything makes a lot of sense in this situation right here. All right, I've got my concern with the defense. I mean, that unit was flying, and they have looked really, really good. I've got one slight little nitpick on them that I want to bring up.
I just can't believe you've got a concern with this defense.
I do have
I'm dying to hear it.
It's coming up in just a little bit. All right, college football fanatics, have you heard about Prize Picks? Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Tim and I love it. We know that you're going to love it too. It's the leader in college sports daily fantasy. We even used it on the show in the prop shop last week. It's a whole heck of a lot of fun. You got to get in on this. They offer more college football props than anyone in the world. They've got the stars, the Heisman hopefuls of the Power 5, and they even have some mid-major players that you've probably never even heard of. They offer props from yardage to touchdowns, even picks. All users that deposit and use our promo code LOCKEDON will receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. You got to use that promo code, though, Locked On. Pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times on any entry. It's just you versus the projected numbers. You can even cross sports, too. Maybe you like a little football prop, maybe a little Sean Tucker over on the rushing yards, and then you take an under on something with LeBron or something in the NFL, something like that. Use their award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play, and you can get it all done in 60 seconds or less. So don't hesitate right now. Check out prizepicks.com and use that promo code Locked On, or go to the App Store and download the app today. Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy.
This episode is also brought to you guys by Rock Auto, my favorite place to keep my 2008 Jeep Compass somehow humming these days on the road. I've used Rock Auto several times. It is super easy to use online, and with the ever-increasing number of make models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questions and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money today when using Rock Auto. It's a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years now, and their prices are reliably low for every single customer. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Again, put Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you to rockauto.com. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. Just visit rockauto.com.
Okay, so this defense is flying. They're fun to watch. They're one of the most fun units that Syracuse has had in the Dino Babers era, which is pretty shocking to say since he came in as this offensive-minded guru. We're going to move fast offensively. And he's kind of strayed away from that. It feels like everything that Dino Babers kind of came in and was built up to be, it's kind of gone the opposite way here as we get to the year 2021. I mean, you look at some of these guys on the defensive line. Cody Roscoe, the ACC Defensive Lineman of the Week. I mean, he's having a fantastic season, getting pressure on the quarterback. Marlo Wax is leading the country in sacks right now. I believe he's up to 5 right now this season. So he's having
Roscoe's got 5.5. So they're right there, 1 and 2.
They're like neck and I think Marlo's got 5 and Roscoe's got 4.5 last I saw. But maybe some numbers got shuffled around or something. But you look at what those guys have done, what Michael Jones has done. Garrett Williams and Deuce Chestnut got beat a couple times against Liberty, but they still have had really strong seasons so far. This is just a much better tackling defense, I think, is what I've learned from a season ago. We saw a lot of holes in the secondary and guys missing tackles and whiffing on stuff, but this year the tackling has stepped up a big number heading into this season. And that's why they're so fun to watch, is that they don't miss plays for the most part.
Yeah, it's amazing because, one, the context of Dino being an offensive coach. I went back and looked. Right now, 10th in the country in total defense is Syracuse. Pretty easy schedule, but you just went against Malik Willis. There were a lot of NFL scouts there to see him for a reason, and they handled him really well. So I think this defense is legit. Whether they finish 10th, maybe not, but I bet they'll finish top 30 if I had to guess right now. You go back the other 5 years of the Dino era. Last year, 112th in the country, 115th the year before that. The best year they had, 2018, total defense, they were still 87th. They've never been a good defensive team. That's the best year they had. Before that, 105 and 122 in his first year. So shout out Tony White, because that's unbelievable, the leap they've made this year. And the weird thing is their turnover margin is 98th in the country.
Yes.
Penalties is 116th. That's also offense, but there's been a lot of bad defensive penalties that we all know about. Mm-hmm. Time of possession for Syracuse is not great. They're 98th in the country. So the defense is out there more. They could be getting tired. That's always been a factor for Syracuse, it feels like, the past couple years. Despite all that, they are playing great. And I'm sure it's going to fall back a little bit once they get into ACC play here. But I really have a lot of faith in this defense right now.
I don't know if it's going to fall back that much. And here's why, is because you brought up the turnover margin. And this is a defense that's just playing good defense. They're not a team that is relying on the big play. I mean, they got the big fumble, and without that fumble, who knows if they win that game against Liberty. But the way that this defense stands up and can take on any challenge, whether it's a quality running back, whether it's a Heisman hopeful quarterback like they saw in Malik Willis from this past week, I just like the way that they play and the way that they carry themselves. I'm a big fan of what Tony White has done, And just you see all these numbers and there's no turnovers that are coming. You're hoping the turnovers come down the line. That's usually something that we see regress. And Syracuse has been a turnover savvy defense really the entire time Dino has been here. But to see them playing this well without any turnovers, really, I think bodes well for what they're going to do as an entire unit for the entire season.
Absolutely. I would have guessed if you would have told me turnover margin would be 98 and total defense would be 10, one would have that ranking. I would have definitely guessed they'd be 10th in turnovers right now and 98th in total defense. That would have been pretty good or pretty like normal for what we've expected from Syracuse recently. And that's so long been a thing. Okay, when are the turnovers going to regress? Is that a concern? And they've kind of bucked that trend. Maybe this is the year it regresses a little bit, but it's also probably because teams aren't taking as many chances because they respect their D a lot more. They had 6 sacks against Liberty. Like, I don't know. I just never expected this defense to be this good this early. And I'm with you. I don't think it regresses a ton in ACC play. One, because there's not a lot of good ACC teams, period.
Right.
Like
I was going to say,
they're already kind of playing
you may have
some tough competition. Yeah.
Just the way that we've seen this non-conference and seeing Liberty, that is probably one of the 3 best offenses you're going to see this season. Based on what you're seeing injury-wise and how the rest of the ACC is playing right now, that might be one of the 3 best offenses you see. And what we've seen
I will
out of
say
the quarterback
Clemson
position,
and Wake. Clemson and Wake are coming up after Florida State. Clemson has not looked great on offense, so maybe I shouldn't group them in there.
Listen,
but
yeah, I was going to say, Liberty has a better offense than Clemson right now. The team that I was going to throw in ahead was maybe NC State with what they can do running the football.
And I'd say Wake has a very good offense.
Wake has a very good. So what? Yeah, but like Clemson is not being given the benefit of the doubt anymore after the performances that they've put up, especially offensively this season so far. Now, I do want to get to my one little nitpick concern with this Syracuse defense right now, and it's what happens in the second half with them, because you brought up the fatigue factor, and I started to look. I was like, really, they're this tired right now, and the drives that they were going up against in that second half were not long. When I look at some of the time of possessions in that second half, first drive for Liberty, 1:28. Second drive, 2:26. Third drive, 3:18. Then 1:27, then 3:56. None of those are spectacularly long drives. Like, you're not getting the 6 or 7 minute drive that we've seen some other offenses put up against Syracuse in times past. And I'm just wondering, okay, in this second half, is it more of an adjustment that other teams are making against Syracuse as opposed to going out there and just wearing them down? I think a season ago that was the case, but this year, so I got some stats here for you. You ready for this? Guess where Syracuse ranks in the first half of opponents' points per game?
Oh, probably. I mean, Rutgers was a shutout in the first half. 1 or 2 in the country, maybe, right? Like,
they're
way
fourth.
Up there.
They are 4th in the country right now with 4.3 points per game in that first half. You know where they rank in the second half?
Based on them being 10, I'd say 30, 35, something like that.
45th in the country. And listen, the number's not awful, especially after you saw what they would do in second halves last year, but 11.3 points per game allowed in the second half. I think what you're seeing teams do in second halves against them, get a little more tempo on them, because that's what we saw Malik Willis do a little bit. He'd get a couple big plays, and then he'd get up to the line in a hurry. He wanted to move that team. And you look at some of these other defenses that are in the top 5, top 7 of first half points per game. I mean, you got Georgia, who's number 1. They dropped down to 3 in the second half. Michigan goes from 2 to 22nd. Wisconsin goes from 3rd all the way down to 104, but I think that number's a little bit skewed because, I mean, did you see all the pick sixes that were thrown against Notre Dame and,
Notre Dame,
stuff like that?
Right.
And they've played in a lot of blowouts too, so you get some cheap ones. Purdue drops down to 29th. Penn State goes down to 27th. Clemson goes down to 6th. Actually, I think Clemson moves up to 6th. So you just see all these teams really hang around and still have like top 25 level defenses after the first halves, but it's Syracuse that takes that dip right there. And I think maybe it's something schematically that offensive coordinators pick up from the booth or whatever it is. They find something that wears this defense down a little bit in the second half, and they poke some holes here and there. So I don't know if it's necessarily fatigue. It may be more schematically of what's happening against Syracuse's defense.
Right. Well, you could be, and I think it's something to monitor. But to play devil's advocate, Albany scored a lot of points in the fourth quarter that didn't mean anything, which doesn't help their overall second
these
half
rankings
stat.
are only against FBS teams. I should have put that
all
in
right.
there too.
So throw out Albany. I would still say, yes, they didn't have any long possessions to deal with against Liberty, but the offense just did nothing in the Liberty and Rutgers games really in the second half. So when the offense is going 3 and out and you're having to run back out there, you still could have fatigue play a factor a little bit. I don't think it should be as much of a factor as it was at times last year, but at least they're not dropping off from like 4th in the country to 105th or something. Then I would think it'd be more of a red flag. It's something to monitor. I just feel like the defense is, they're going to get a little bit more tired in the second half in general. And then the offense just hasn't sort of elevated its game in the second half to give that defense longer times in between possessions too.
And again, this is a nitpick here, all right? We do this with elite units. You try to find the little flaws in them when they are playing as well as they are. This defense has been fantastic. I look forward to watching this defense every single Saturday afternoon. And to see this being the one little concern that I have, again, this is what you do when you're playing as well as you are. This should be looked at as more of a compliment almost for this team because we are diving into the weeds. That's how good they are this year. They're so fun to watch.
Right.
But it is something I want to bring to people's attention is that there is a pretty steep drop-off in second halves, and I think it's more schematics.
Yeah, and look, the big plays, avoiding that has been so big. The tackling's been much better. I've still seen spots that they missed it. Deuce got burned a little bit, but he's been good overall. Jeff Garrett really missed some tackles. Yeah. I want to shout out Justin Barron as well because it looks like he's the starting rover now.
I watched back the game last night, and he came up and made some big plays throughout that entire second half. I really liked because he almost reminds me of a linebacker, like almost the Lee Koba type from last year, where he was just flying in and making some plays. That's what I saw out of Justin Barron in that second half.
Right, and I think Rob Hanna has been sort of a weak link for us back there. So if Barron can develop into the guy and a confident sort of back half of the defense rover position type guy. Also, shout out Eric Coley. He comes in, and he's not a guy that's usually starting. He replaces Carter last week, who I think was dressed but never actually appeared on the field that I saw anyway, and he makes that big play towards the end. I think the 4th down stop he was involved in pretty heavily.
Yeah. All right, coming up next, we're going to get to our look at headlines because I think a lot of Syracuse fans are perplexed about the line that BetOnline.ag is setting for them for this upcoming weekend against Florida State down in Tallahassee. And speaking of BetOnline.ag, they are back and better than ever as teams are in the midst of yet another football season. And as always, they are your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. BetOnline.ag, they've got a new updated site and interface with even more odds, props, and contests. The number one source for everything football. So head on over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 100% welcome bonus. That is double your initial deposit, 100% when you use our promo code Locked On. So sign up, use that promo code, maybe get a little bit of sprinkling done on this Sean Tucker Heisman. We'll get to that in just a little bit too, because he's got some Heisman odds up on betonline.ag. They've got football, they've got basketball, boxing, your favorite Vegas casino games, and more. So don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, this line has people's mind in a pretzel right now. Because right now, Syracuse on the look-ahead line right now, early in the week, is a 4.5-point underdog to an 0-4 Florida State team that is one of the bottom 25 teams in the country right now. Mike Norvell is pissed at his team and the way that his unit has come about this 2021 season. There's people calling for his job, but 4.5? Really? I mean, I'm absolutely shocked by this. What did you think when you saw the 4.5 here?
So I guess the whole logic here is Florida State's 0-4. They can't fall to 0-5. There's no way. How is Florida State going to go 0-5? First time they were 0-3 since Bobby Bowden's first year, I think in 1976. Somehow they went to 0-4. But that's the thing. Like, that could have applied last week at Louisville.
And guess what? I
They
thought
went
the
to
same
1-4.
thing. So last week, the line on BetOnline.ag, Louisville was favored by a point. And there
Yep.
was juice coming in. And I think it may have even shifted to a pick'em or maybe Florida State being a favorite by the time kickoff. So all the sharp action was getting in on Florida State, it felt like.
Right.
Which is weird, but the home team, all that stuff. And you thought to yourself, okay, is this going to be the week that they're the pissed off group and they come out guns a-blazing? Mike Norvell is going to put in those extra hours to get his team ready. They got their doors blown off in the first half. They were awful.
Yeah.
They were awful. I think they allowed 31 points all in the first half. They shut out Louisville in the second half. They played a phenomenal second half defensively.
When it didn't matter.
They just fell way too far behind the 8 ball. And if you can't get your 0-3 team ready to go out of the break in that first half, you're not going to win many football games this year. And I think the logic applies here once again. If Syracuse gets off to a fast start, Florida State's not going to come back on them because the pissed off team train, that left the station last week. If it didn't happen last week, what's going to make them more pissed off this week? All right, last week was the peak, I think, of what you could have felt.
I mean, they'll still be pissed off this week, right? Like, they'll still be ready, you would think.
But I think at a certain point, you cross the chasm of pissed off to quitting. And I feel like losing that game to Louisville was that crossing of the chasm.
And that's the big question here. The odds makers have to decide. That's the big question that bettors have to decide, Syracuse fans. Like, I was watching the Louisville game last week, and I'm thinking, do I want Louisville to win or do I want Florida State to win? Because in a way, it makes me feel a little bit better if maybe they had a win and then they're 1-3 and they are like, the thought of them going 0-5 just feels like it's from an alternate universe and it can't happen. And this is the week they come together. But at the same time, they look so bad that how do you bet on them? How do you support them in a game against a Syracuse team that looked pretty good last week? I thought the line was going to be basically a pick'em. And that's given Florida State those 3 points at home, which who knows how much of a crowd will turn out. I'm sure they'll be booing at the first chance they can get out there in Tallahassee. But yeah, it's a little bit surprising to see the line fall the way it did. And I think it has to be some motivation for Syracuse as well.
I'm intrigued by Garrett Schrader's first road test. The first big road test for him as the starting quarterback of Syracuse. And it comes in one of the more iconic locations in the entire ACC. I get it. He's played in big games in the SEC. Yes, he has. But a lot of that has been in mop-up duty, too. He hasn't really played a ton of those big SEC games where he's coming out for the opening kickoff, and he's expected to go out there first drive, set the tone for everything. So I'm intrigued by that aspect of this season, of this game, and really the season for Garrett Schrader as well. But I think you need a fast start against Florida State because you can bury them in the first quarter if you get 7-10 points. Because at that point, if they are down 7 or 10 points, it's quitting time for that team. They're going to look at themselves in the mirror and say, you know what, this season's lost. Like, there's nothing we can do at this point.
We'll know in the first half what Florida State showed up. And the thing is, if you're an odds maker as well, you also have to ask the question, all right, who's more talented of these two teams? And I think even the hardest of Syracuse fans will tell you that it's probably Florida State, right? Like, they're not playing like it, and I don't think talent's everything, don't get me wrong, but that has to be a factor as well. Florida State has more dudes than Syracuse. The question is, are they actually going to come together for once?
So when we take a look at these lines early in the week, 4.5. Now the juice is on Florida State, so odds makers think that this line's actually going to push more towards 5.5 maybe by week's end. But do you think it'll get there, or do you think there's going to be some late action on Syracuse that's going to draw this thing a little bit closer to 3?
I think it's, if anything, going to go more in Florida State's direction, like towards the 5 mark. And that's just because I think Sharps moved the line, and I see why Sharps will be on Florida State this week.
Yeah, and then that total of 52, anything that you're taking away there?
No, I mean, I feel like Syracuse's unders have been the move so far, with the exception of that weird Albany line that was over under 44. I never got that. I don't even know why that was there, but we took advantage of it. And yeah, I mean, Syracuse's defense has been good. First half unders have been hitting for Cuse as well. I feel like their defense has come out, and you talked about the first half to second half stuff, that maybe there's something to that they're really, clamping down in the first half.
This feels like a 27-21 game.
Yeah.
Doesn't it?
No,
Like,
I
and
could see
that
that.
lends itself to an under there. I'm
It
with
could
you.
be a
I kind of
blowout
like the
too in
under.
one way. It's just I could see it going. I could see
Yeah.
Syracuse blowing out Florida State and them going to 0-5 and Norvell getting fired on Monday. And I could see Florida State getting angry and finally playing like we know they can. I mean, this is a team that did challenge Notre Dame in the first game of the season. So there's something in there. There is some talent.
Yeah. It should be a fun game this weekend because you're going to learn something about Syracuse, I feel like. Because we've seen over the past couple of years how they get that big win, and then it's just, we ride the hangover of the big win the rest of the season, and you don't win any more games. But you've got that one victory in the bag that you're feeling good about yourself, so it feels like a successful season. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
after that Clemson win in 2017, they didn't win a game the rest of the year. After, like, some of these big games, they just don't show up after, and it's frustrating as a Syracuse fan. So one other thing I do want to hit on from BetOnline.ag is Sean Tucker. He's got Heisman odds now, plus 5,000 to win the Heisman for Sean Tucker. He's 13th. He actually, right now, we talked about, like Syracuse going up against a Heisman caliber quarterback in Malik Willis. They have the same odds right now at plus 5,000. You've seen the RG3 tweets. So listen, like, do I think he's going to win the Heisman? No. I do want to address something with that RG3 tweet in a little bit, but like plus 5,000, like, again, it feels like a 2-horse race right now with the quarterbacks in the SEC, Al and Bryce Young, but like, this is cool to see at least. Like, can Sean Tucker get himself in the green room
That's the thing,
into New York?
Right. He's not going to win. I would advise betting on it, but heck, if he gets in the green room, I think someone tweeted this at us, and I think it was Dominic. So shout out to him if it was, but he was like, think about a recruiting tool that could be. And if it wasn't him, whoever it was, I apologize. Like, that's a good point. Him. Recruiting, it's huge. So, and the other thing is,
here's what I would say about it is that Eric Dungy was on that ESPN Heisman ladder week after week during that 2018 season. And if anything, recruiting has gotten worse since then from that season. So that's the one thing where it's like, it really only matters if you get to New York or if you actually win the whole thing. Because like outside of that, it doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. And listen, I get there's all this hype between the RG3 tweet, but I do want to lay some things out for you here, all right? Dino Babers and RG3 overlapped at Baylor for 4 years. Dino Babers was an offensive coach at Baylor for 4 years while RG3 was there. You think maybe he's not feeding him a little something like, hey, why don't you show my guy a little bit of love?
Yeah, and Dino talked about the 44 discussion this week. He basically said, like, it's not for me to decide, but I hope that I'll have a big smile on my face if we're still talking about that in 4 weeks after ACC competition. Yeah. And he said he'll put together a tape and have those guys that wore the 44 jersey to vote on it. So it's becoming more and more of a thing here. I mean, you look at the national stats, he's right up there amongst the leaders in a lot of categories, all purpose yards. He's second in the country right now, at least per game on a per game basis. So yeah, he's the real deal, man. And I do think that maybe Dungy didn't help recruiting, but it didn't hurt. Like, I don't think recruiting's gotten worse. Also, they already had a quarterback committed at that position. I think it could help their running back position in particular, which does look good for the future, but maybe a 2023, 2024 guy is more apt to come to Syracuse now at that running back position.
Hopefully. We'll see. It's certainly a good thing. Like, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. I'm just saying don't expect everything to take a giant leap because Sean Tucker's got a plus 5,000 next to his name on the Heisman odds. Listen, it's a good thing for the program, but I don't necessarily know. We've seen this program do a bad job at bottling up the steam and then doing something with it over the past, really during the Dino Babers era, over the past 10 years, really. So we'll see. It should be a fun little way to at least make this season interesting if Sean Tucker continues to play at the level that he is. And both you and I love watching Sean Tucker every single Saturday. So, all right, that's going to wrap things up for us here on the Locked On Syracuse podcast. We are going to be back tomorrow. We will have more football stuff. We'll grade out Garrett Schrader because we put out a poll on our Twitter account at @LO_Syracuse. So go vote on that. Grade Garrett Schrader's performance. We'll read your responses as well. Some other interesting Twitter notes too. And we're going to sprinkle in a little bit of basketball conversation as well because there were some interesting things brought up about the center position, and we want to address that on tomorrow's show as well. And we've also got some rankings from across the country. They rank out all 130 teams, and Syracuse is taking big leaps across the board. So we will dive into all of that on tomorrow's show. For Tim, I'm Tyler. We'll talk to you guys on Wednesday.